Okay. I don't really know how to start this, but for a while I've been wanting to make like a video about my experience with OCD. I know like a lot of people experience it differently, and you know, there is a lot of different types of like, I guess like, bitch, you can tell I'm too much into music right now and like fucking like groups because I'm thinking about like subgroups and subgenres. But like there's different subcategories that OCD can kind of fall into, like different ways it can like present itself. This is just going to be about like my experience with OCD, kind of like how it kind of came about. I know a few of you guys have been asking me to make like a video about it. So I didn't get diagnosed with OCD until like a lot later, into like my adulthood. Honestly, maybe about like 4 or 5 years ago. And I always knew I had like characteristics of it, you know, but like I didn't know that I actually like had it because I don't know, I never got treatment for anything growing up, you know, like my parents were very like anti-mental health. That was one of the main things that kind of led me to want to be a therapist when I got into that field, you know, and went to grad school and all that stuff, was because like I wanted to be there for someone because I never had anyone there for me when I was a kid, you know what I mean? So like, you know, it was always there throughout my life, and even looking back on it now, like both of my parents display like very particular like OCD traits, and there is somewhat of a genetic component to it, depending on who you ask. But for sure my mom, she's gonna deny it. Like all hell will break loose if she ever sees this, but like she will deny it till like she turns like black and blue. And then my dad, I feel like, is a little bit more OCPD. Now, OCPD and OCD are two different things. We're not going to get into OCPD, but that's a little bit more like particular, like structure to a T, like very anal vibes, you know, but not like a little bit more than like just having a preference for things. We're not going to get into like the definition of OCD, like according to the DSM and stuff like that. If you want, look it up, like according to the DSM, or like, bitch, like go to a therapist or go to a doctor. Like that's what you need to do, you know, like a psychiatrist, and then they'll see. But like honestly, if you have OCD, you'll kind of know you have it. But for the most part, it has to do with like an obsession, and it has to do with like a compulsion. So the obsession is like a thought, usually like anxiety related. And you know, it's like one of those thoughts that don't just like go away. It's constantly like in the back of your head, like especially with like particular events or particular items, things like that. The compulsion that needs to be done to help get rid of that anxiety, or help like, you know, flatline it for the most part, you know, like bring it down from like a 10 maybe to like a 4, you know, that way nothing like bad happens, whatever you define it as. So it's like kind of like this weird anxiety belief thing, needing to be crossed out with a compulsion, with like some sort of act. So for example, a lot of people have OCD with numbers. So I have a friend who has issues with like turning doorknobs, for example, or like locking their car. And I actually have a couple people that I know like that in my life. But like, you know, turning doorknobs a certain number has to be done a certain number. If it's not done that number, then something bad's gonna happen. So in order to get rid of that anxiety, like that thought of like, oh, something bad's gonna happen, I have to go ahead and do this, which is turn the doorknob 8 times, right? Or lock my car a certain number of times. And a lot of people get like that, where it's like, oh, okay, well, I pressed my car doorknob thingy like 17 times. The main difference between that and like OCD would be like the thought in the back of your head becoming kind of like crippling, to the point where it's like it kind of rolls over everything. And even if like, you know, for sure you did lock it, it's like you feel like you have to check like a few times, and you go back because like it definitely doesn't leave your mind, and it's like it's debilitating, you know. And I want to stress that like debilitating aspect, because like a lot of the times with OCD, like you think about something, you can tell yourself like it's not real or it's not gonna happen or whatever, but like you still feel as though it will happen because you didn't go ahead and double check this thing, or do this thing multiple times, or do that compulsory, bitch, you don't go ahead and do that compulsion, you know what I mean? Me specifically, I have OCD mainly with contamination. Growing up as a kid, I've always been like that, with like small things like eggs, or like, you know, raw meat, which a lot of people are because sanitary reasons, right? But with me, it was like definitely more like extreme, where it's like I feel as though like whenever I cooked like an egg or used eggs in some way, like I had to go ahead and like wash my hands each time I did something that kind of touched that egg. And see how that doesn't make sense logically. It's like, oh, you just like wash your hands because you just cracked the egg, right? With me, it's like, well, this area was kind of by this egg, so therefore this area is dirty. And since I didn't clean it yet, I have to keep washing my hands. You know what I mean? Or like I need to go ahead and clean that whole area, even though like nothing touched it. The egg didn't touch it, but like it was by it. For like, germs and stuff like that. When someone's sick or if someone was coughing as a child in the store, my ass would just like hold my breath for like 10 hours. You know what I mean? Like I was not gonna like breathe in that stuff. I held my breath until it was like 3 or 4 hours away from someone. Like it would freak me out, you know? So like, bitch, imagine how I was when COVID started. Like it was kind of like okay at first, but bitch, like it definitely like messed my brain up a little bit more as time went on because it re-sparked a lot of like that contamination stuff when it came to like, oh, this is contaminated, therefore like everything that's touching this thing or like is in this environment of that thing is contaminated. And it got so bad to the point where I had to get back on medication. But I got back on medication because I was literally like about to die. I had like the worst panic attack. I was going down a rabbit hole of cleaning my whole entire house because nothing was clean to me. And like things I didn't even touch anything. Like I just felt dirty. Like I felt like I was contaminated. So therefore like my living room was contaminated and like my floors and everything. Like no matter what I did, nothing was getting clean. I like bleached my floors like 6 times. I like fucking shampooed my fucking couches. Bitch, I did everything. I was wiping down the walls and then I just felt like I was gonna have a heart attack. Like my brain and my heart couldn't stop. And even though like I knew I wanted to stop and like I knew it didn't make sense, I couldn't not do it because I felt like it was going to like be the end of the world. I felt dirty. I felt disgusting, you know, like I just felt like, I don't know. That's basically how I ended up getting back on medication and stabilizing my OCD for the most part because bitch, like I was about to die. I remember I called my mom and even though I didn't live with her at this time, you know, because this was like a few years ago, like I said, she was in Vegas with her friends on lunch and I called her and I was crying and she had to like leave her lunch and she was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I can't get the house clean enough. And I was just like fucking crying and bawling. I was like, my heart is gonna like explode. It hurts so bad. And bitch, my chest did fucking hurt so bad. Like it was not even funny. Like I don't even know. Like anyway, long story short, she was like, bitch, you need to get in touch with your psychiatrist. Like call her right now. So I called my psychiatrist and then like I switched my medication because the reason I got off medication the first time was because I felt like it didn't work for me as much as I wanted it to. So I switched my medication and then, you know, I started going to therapy again and like everything works out. And I feel like at this point I can manage my OCD very well. I do have bad days. Like yesterday I had not a really bad flare up, but like I had a flare up, you know, where my brain was kind of fucking with me. I feel like with medication and everything, like I feel like I'm able to kind of control it a little bit more. I'm able to, you know, fight it and realize that these things will pass and my mind's kind of playing tricks with me, you know? So like I feel like I'm more stable. Now, a thing that bothers me is when people say that OCD is curable. In my opinion, it's not. Some people might say it is. But this is just out of my experience, but it's going to vary depending on who you ask. You know, some people are going to say it is, some people will say it isn't. I'm basing this totally off of my experience. I feel as though like you can maintain it and you can kind of go into like, I guess like a rehabilitation, but like there's always like that possibility that it can spark up, especially if you're not like doing anything to kind of like maintain it with medication or whatever, you know? And like a few of other people that I know that have OCD agree with this. Some people who say that you can be like cured from it are full of shit, whatever. It's the same thing as, you know, someone who maybe has had substance abuse issues in the past or someone who has had eating disorders in the past. You can cure yourself from that, but like there's always the chance of you going ahead and you know, just, you know, having a bad day and it could flare up again. With me, I think I said in another video, like one of the main things that I wish kind of happened growing up was like me getting more help when I was a kid. Or I said something along the lines of like, I feel like I've always had OCD because like of like the mentality of like that weird existential thing. That's what I said. Yeah. Like I kind of learned to maintain it. That's what me and my psychiatrist have came to the conclusion. Like I was very good at maintaining a lot of things and I developed like a lot of like coping skills to kind of deal with like a lot of the mental stuff I have. Pretty much when I was younger, I would obsess over death. And not in like a weird way where I was like, you know, wanting to myself or anything like that, even though that kind of like happened later on. We're not going to talk about that right now. But like if you know, like around 12, right? We're not going to talk about it right now. Anyway, So when I was a kid, I just kind of like obsessed over like the idea of death and like, oh my God, like everyone's gonna die, I'm gonna die. And it was one of those things where it didn't leave my head and I would have like the worst like panic attacks. Like we're talking about when I was like 4, 5, 6, you know what I mean? And it got so bad to the point where it's like I was having really bad insomnia as a child. At that young of an age, it's really bad to have like sleeping problems, you know what I mean? Like it usually means like something traumatic kind of have happened. But like, I don't know, it was just like one of those things I obsessed about. And then like, you know, eventually I feel like it kind of subsided because I moved around a lot as a kid. Like I moved around every 2 or 3 years. So I think like with new environments and stuff like that, I kind of like was able to refocus on different things. So then when I got older in fourth grade, how old was I? How old are you in fourth grade? Like not, I think I was 9 because I was like a year ahead. Like I was like one of the younger ones. So I think I was 9 in fourth grade. Anyway, when I was like 9 or 10, I started to develop an eating disorder. And that had to do a lot with my OCD. And I was like obsessing over like my weight, like the numbers on the scale, and I was obsessing over like the body fat and the BMI, and I was obsessing over like the proportions of my body in a sense, but not like in an ED way where it's like I want to be skinny, but in a way where it's like I don't know, bitch. Like I said, a lot of OCD stuff doesn't make sense in my brain. So like in a lot of people's brains, it's just like a weird like thought, and the compulsion has to be done. So it's like it got so bad to the point where I remember like in sixth grade, I got in trouble because like we went on a cruise and like my parents just never noticed, you know, because I was really good at hiding it. And you know, it's because they're busy. Like whatever. We're not going to talk about parenting stuff, you know. But like when I was in sixth grade, we went on a cruise, and like that's when my parents noticed I was like all bones, you know, like literally they were like, why don't you want to get in the pool? Why don't you want to do whatever? And I got in trouble on the cruise, and I was like getting forced to kind of like eat more gradually because like they refused to get like treatment at the time. Once again, didn't believe in like mental health stuff. Yeah, and then it kind of like you know became okay. I think it's because at that age I was also like you know, growing a lot more around sixth grade. You're like what, like a preteen? My metabolism was really high. I didn't need to like really do anything with it. All OCD related with me because it was like that obsession where it just randomly came into a thing where it's like this is something that I can control because like anxiety is going out the roof with X, Y, and Z. I need to be able to go ahead and execute these things in order to control it. And it wasn't really like one of those things where it got too bad. I kind of like knew like my limits at that time, and like I kind of knew what I was comfortable with at the time. And like, you know, I kind of knew all these things in order to maintain like these OCD things in the back of my brain, you know? Mind you, there's a few other things that are always there in the back of my head around this stuff. These are just like 2 examples of like things that I obsessed over. Other things I obsessed over as a kid was like praying. Like I prayed all the time when I was a kid. Because like I grew up kind of like religious, not really, but like a little bit, you know, like believing in God and all that other stuff. And I would always pray, and like I remember like when I was praying, I didn't like feel like it was complete until I like talked about everyone in my family. And if I missed one person or if I missed like a situation or like an animal or something, I had to restart. And like bitch, like I would be up for hours like praying because I would forget something, and then I would have to add like a bunch of other things in order to make sure nothing bad happens. Weird stuff, I know, but like this is how OCD works, you know what I mean? So like that's another thing that happened when I was a kid, and blah blah blah. So back to the Edie thing. So with Edie, like I ended up going ahead and learning how to maintain it for the most part. After like, you know, ninth grade, I moved again. It was like, okay, it was whatever. Like everything kind of like subsided. I still was like in the same mentality, but like my parents were just like going through too much to even like notice me, and I was like more of a independent, autonomous at that time. I think everything kind of like subsided, and I feel like I was in a really good remission because I gained like a lot of weight and I was healthy. And then when I was 16, something just like changed in my brain. I think it's because I finished high school, and it wasn't like my choice really to like leave school early. It was, but it wasn't. We're not going to talk about that right now. And I ended up going ahead and just like going downhill spiraling, you know, to the point where it's like I didn't eat anything. I would drink like a large iced coffee a day. I would maybe eat a salad, and then I would go ahead, and if I did eat anything, it'd be very small, and I would be religious about working out. So it's like I would wake up at 4 in the morning, go to the gym, work out until like 6, and then I would come home, shower and everything, get ready, do what I had to do, like go to work or whatever. And then because at 16 I had my first job, And then I went ahead and, like I said, I would drink like iced coffee and water. And then after that, I would go ahead and come home, eat a little bit of something to make sure I don't like faint or something. And then I would go ahead and I would work out again for hours, you know? Which is another thing with EDs. We can talk about that later. But like low key bulimia, because bulimia is not just throwing up, you know what I mean? But like it had a lot to do with like my OCD, right? Which brings me to this. A lot of OCD has a lot to do with control, which is a lot of people's, I guess, like vice for the most part. But like OCD has a lot to do with the anxiety, the compulsions, and the control. So my theory is because like I never had like stability as a kid because I moved around a lot and like my life was just kind of like hectic. That's the way I kind of like maintained it. Same with like eating disorders and stuff like that. Like I just maintained it that way for some reason. But like I said, a few things that I had like growing up were the obsessive thoughts with death, the obsessive thoughts with like eating and like the calories and like how it is on my body, and the obsessive thoughts with like cleanliness. I said that really weird, bitch. Cleanliness, because like that's something that I think my mom portrays a lot. Like my mom's one of those people who mops and sweeps multiple times a day, wipes down the countertops with like bleach. Like, you know, she's very clean like that. And I always thought that was normal, but bitch, like there's a difference between being a clean freak or like having to do it. And she says like she doesn't have to do it, but bitch, like I know she has to do it. So like those are a few things that like stem throughout my life. And then like later on when things started getting more in control and like I was able to decide what I wanted to do, I feel as though that's when it kind of led more into contamination issues where it's like, okay, I can control a lot of things in my life, but like I can't control germs, bitch. Like you can't even see them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, bitch. Like that's nasty. Like you control it by cleaning it. Anyway, so that's where we went into like the whole COVID thing. Like afterwards I spiraled downhill and I just needed to get back on medication and go to therapy. And like now I feel like I'm fucking peachy keen and fine. Except for like when I do get triggered for OCD stuff, I get triggered when I don't get a lot of sleep or if I'm stressed. So like there has to be some sort of like lack of something in my brain or like in my life where it's like I'm not able to really give my full energy to like fighting this thing, you know? But it's one of those things like where I do good, but like I have my day still, which is why I said earlier, like OCD like isn't curable in my opinion. Like you're gonna have like hiccups every now and then, you know, like, and that's where I was yesterday. I just feel like yesterday was like one of those things where my brain was trying to play a lot of tricks with me. And a number one way I can kind of tell is like if I'm washing a plate, for example, and if I keep on washing it, I'm like, hold up, like I can kind of fight it because like medication and treatment, you know? But yeah, it's like one of those things where I kind of know what triggers me through the help of like therapy and medication and stuff like that, which was like my number one, I guess, suggestion if you have like OCD is like to get on some sort of medication because it kind of helps a lot. A lot of it has to do with like imbalance of chemicals in your brain, or it can be genetic, or it can be kind of like a trauma thing, you know? So many different things, but explore that in therapy and then kind of like, you know, teach yourself how to calm down and ground yourself a little bit more with therapy when these things kind of spark up because it can happen still even with medication and all this other stuff. Plus like having a psychiatrist will definitely help a little bit more than like self-medicating or doing whatever because, you know, trust me, someone from experience, I feel a lot better now than me trying to deal with it in the past. Even though I was in the mental health field forever, it's still one of those things where it's like, I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to take medication. I don't want to do whatever. I'm okay. I can handle it. And bitch, like I couldn't. I almost died. You know what I mean? In order to get treatment for OCD, I think it's important to go ahead and go to therapy to just talk about it and learn some skills to ground yourself or like learn some triggers and like what to do with those triggers and just vent about it. Another thing is, like I said, medication. And sometimes with OCD, what they go ahead and do is exposure therapy, which I think is a double-sided sword for the most part. It is a very good treatment. It's scientific based, and exposure is what it sounds like, you know. So say you have a very bad fear of the dark, your OCD deals with that. Turn off the lights and you stay in the dark for like 1 second and then you leave. But like that 1 second is going to be like very fucking detrimental. You can do it yourself, but like with the therapist, at least they're trained and they can kind of help you with that stuff. That's what exposure work is. With the example of germs, if you feel contaminated with an egg, they can go ahead and make you crack the egg and you don't wash your hands for like 5 seconds. You know what I mean? Work your way up. That's exposure. And it does help over time because your brain kind of realizes, oh, nothing bad happened with X, Y, and Z. But it's a double edged sword because I think a lot of people aren't ready for it and it can definitely cause a lot of harm when you're not with the right person. A lot of people can be trained, but it doesn't mean they're good at it. you know? So one of those things just to keep in mind, some of you guys kind of assume it, I guess, with yourselves, or maybe you're curious about it. Just go ahead and think about those main components, which is like obsessions, having those compulsory acts to get rid of the obsessions, and then, you know, is it kind of like one of those things where it's like so detrimental where it like definitely feels like you are getting like a lower quality of life is the way we would call it, like in therapy, you know, where it's impacting a lot of things. Like it's not only impacting like your mental aspect, like the psychological aspect, it's impacting like social life and like biology life and all this other stuff, you know what I mean? So those are a few things just to kind of keep in mind. I can kind of go into detail a little bit more if you guys wanted me to, but like, bitch, I feel like this video was all over the place because I don't really know how to explain this to people. I don't really want to like say like this is OCD and this is how you get treatment. This is just like my experience with it, and how I get triggered with it, and how, kind of like, you know, what I do right now to maintain it. Like I said, I went to therapy. I kind of know what happens, like the key trigger points to it. I know exactly kind of how to calm myself down or distract myself or ground myself now. And I have my support systems, and then on top of it, like I have my medication, which is Zoloft. Very, very good medication for OCD stuff, if you can handle it. I know a lot of people get zombified by it. They call it the zombie drug. I know a lot of people go ahead and say it doesn't work for them, or they get like fucking, you know, I was gonna say hypnosis, but it's not hypnosis. Fuck, what is it called? Hallucinations. There we go, bitch. But like, you know, one of those things just to keep in mind. Everything works for someone. You just have to figure out what works. Like, it's a shot in the dark. Figure it out if you're okay with medication. I usually don't like medication for a lot of things, but like, bitch, like, we only have one life. I'm young. I need to figure this out so I'm not miserable. And if that means like taking medication every day like a fucking vitamin, it is what it is. I have to do what I have to do. So like, I'm not fucking having crippling anxiety and dying in my house. You know what I mean? Because that's like how bad I felt like it got. I don't know what to say anymore. I'm not good at explaining stuff. Like, especially when it comes to like stuff relating to me and my mental health. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Go to a therapist, go to a psychiatrist if you think you have it. But like, ask me questions, bitch. I'll like reply to them in like the fucking comments, because like I don't know what to say anymore. Okay, I'm gonna go. Hopefully I explained a lot in this video, bitch. Like, I don't know, I'll refilm it if I have to. I'll watch this. I'll actually watch it and I'll see if I have to like re-explain it. But bitch, like, leave comments if you need to, and like we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. That's a better idea. Okay, bye. I love you. Here is a sip of iced coffee just for you. No ice because it fucking melted. Okay, love you.